and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today is January 15th, 2026, and we are joined by freelance executive producer Rue Payne. Rue has spent the last 15 plus years producing integrated campaigns for some of the world's biggest brands. She brings a rare mix of hands-on, in-the-weeds production experience and big-picture executive-level oversight, working across film, photography, CGI, illustration, and AI. Over the course of her career, she's worked with studios and production houses, agencies, and in-house teams, touching everything from healthcare and CPG to travel, sports, finance, and luxury. Welcome, Rue.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to have you. I was sitting here thinking, I wish we had visuals so I could see you. I should have chosen that as an option.
Next time.
Next time, for sure. And I will be seeing you in person next week. So that's a positive. So
I can't come soon enough. I'm so excited.
I know, me too. Well, listen, I think a really great way to start it is for you to kind of talk to us a little bit about your background. I love the idea that not all producers' career take the same path. And it's really helpful to learn a little bit about you and how you got your start.
Definitely. I actually started in this industry when I was 16 years old. I was still in high school, of course. And my preschool sweetheart asked if he built a TV station for the school, would I be willing to run the people part of it?
Oh my gosh.
I didn't really know that had anything to do with producing. I just thought that sounded really fun. And so you could say that I've always been kind of in that builder entrepreneurial space of building from the ground up. Really, that's what started my track into media, I was originally on a news track. I got my degree in news and was working at TV stations, etc. And thankfully, very early on in my career was intercepted by some very, very smart people who saw my talent, saw my interests, and also observed the way that news was shifting and changing at the time. And they said, hey, this is great. You can continue this, but have you ever thought about advertising? And that shifted my career into more of an advertising lens. I did a little bit in live events for a while. I went abroad and had a gap year in Paris for a bit, which is a whole different story. And then really found my place in advertising. Started off on the studio side, then went to the client side, and then most recently went to agency. So it's been a broad experience. And it was really, a learning curve of every proportion. I mean, we're from a small town. We didn't really have a lot of funds or money or anything to work with. We really patched together what we could, and it was a blast.
Well, I'm sure it set the foundation, right, for how you have to patch together a lot as a producer. So
yes, always in problem-solving mode.
Totally. Okay, so tell me a little bit about, what your role is as an executive producer now, which I know has changed a lot over the years, but just right now.
Certainly. It's taken a lot of different forms. Trying to describe the role of a producer to anybody who's not a producer is always kind of a task in and of itself because it's so many different things. But essentially, what I consider my role to be is people come to me with an idea. They give me a what, and I show them a how. And so whether that is a TV commercial or an integrated campaign or a photo shoot or CGI or any of the above, it's my role that when people come with ideas that have hopefully never been done before, right? New, fresh, creative thinking, that I put together the path to get them there. And that includes talent, that includes where we're going to do it, how much does it cost. You really craft the reality of that vision, and then you make it happen.
And what are you known for on your team?
So interesting, this question. I think when I was reflecting on a lot of the conversations I've had recently, I've been told, and I have to give, their perspective versus mine. It's definitely my insane level of organization, sometimes to a dizzying degree, and even for me. And then also, I think at the heart of everything is clear communication. I think communication and keeping everybody in the loop at the right time is crucial to the success of any project. So I'd say those two things, communication and organization, are at the heart of everything I do.
Well, and I can second that because I have had the pleasure of working with you recently. And I can say that you answered every question clearly. You replied immediately. You always made us feel like our questions were valid and not irritating. And you were open to suggestion ideas. So I really enjoyed working with you because of that. And I know it feels obvious when you're the person doing that and you can't imagine doing it any other way. But from where I sit, it's not always the case.
The joy of what we do is that it is a conversation about creativity at the end of the day. If we really take out all the fluff, it's always a conversation. And thank you for saying that. I think it's exactly like you said. If you're living in it every day, that's just your reality. So you don't really know any other way of being. And so making sure that everybody's clear, questions are answered, and nobody feels silly for showing up to a conversation is what makes the work great.
Yeah. Okay. So from a photographer or director or rep, like maybe let's just say a vendor point of view, what is important for people to better understand about your job? You know, sometimes I feel like I'm translating to my artists what you're telling me, and they will have their own perceptions of what's going on the other end. Like, oh my God, we submitted the bid 3 days ago. Why haven't we heard anything? Or, you know, and they come up with their own narrative around what might be happening on the other end. And I think you're dealing with so much more on your end than you've ever had to. Are there any misconceptions or things that need to be better understood about what you're doing on your end?
Yeah, you know, Heather, I feel like resounding narratives in our industry right now that comes not just with my role, but with everyone who is frankly overwhelmed right now with how much responsibility and communication and the always on aspect of our job is dealing with is the personal narrative that can come with, you know, oh, there's been a delay in communication, or we didn't quite hit the mark, or something like that. So I guess all that to say, I think there are so many things going on that very often it has nothing really to do with that individual in that moment. There's just so much to manage communication wise. There are things changing daily, even within a campaign concept that you might have pitched for. And so my role as a producer is to kind of ride the wave with that and pick out the key moments when all of those changes and conversations will actively affect someone's ability to really contribute to the conversation. Mm-hmm. So while all of these changes are happening and while all of these conversations are going on, it's my role to really figure out when to communicate that back to a rep or to a vendor and ask for revisions, because what I don't want is to just be, you know, a sounding board back and forth. And then there's a lot of wasted time on the vendor side trying to match the pace of changes happening within the agency or the client side.
Yeah, that's such an interesting way of saying it, like matching the pace, right? It's like, we don't really need to hear the minutia of what's going on. I just need to know the big picture and how it affects what I'm going to be providing for you.
Exactly. It's my job as a producer to call down all of the conversations happening on the agency and client side into a so what for the vendor.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that's really, really smart. And when I said that you were good at communication and sharing of information, that's where you're coming from, and not a surprise.
Exactly. Because it's also, these are relationships, right? These are long-term relationships. I don't ever think of any of the times that I'm inviting someone to bid on a project as that being a standalone project. It's really you're learning about who that person is, how they come to a problem and how they solve it. But for me as a producer, I'm always thinking long term. It's not just that project that I'm considering you for. I'm considering you for life. Maybe it's not that project that you're a fit for, but I'm also observing, okay, as we move through the conversation, what are the things that you might be a good fit for? So I think that's another really important thing to keep in mind is these are long relationships that we have in this industry. And so I think any good producer is keeping that in mind. They're not just looking at the immediate need.
I love that. And I want to kind of put an exclamation point on that, because I tell my artists all the time how rare it is to get invited to bid a job. We all know that, right? There's not a lot of jobs out there. And when we get invited to bid a job, if you fast forward to the end and you don't get the job, that is an enormous bummer, of course, because you want to get the job. You've invested time, money, effort, all of it into it. But what we all need to remember is that the time that we're putting in to this project is also for the future, even if we don't get it. So when you get to have an hour-long creative call with the team, or you get to present your treatment to the team, in what other situation are you getting that time with a creative team to talk about you and your work? It doesn't exist anywhere else. Like the portfolio shows aren't happening like they used to. The one-on-one meetings aren't happening like they used to. But you and I on a phone call talking about the strategy for how to approach a job, not creatively, but like financially, how to make something happen. You and I are investing in each other's relationship. And that is way more than any email I can send you that says, hey, look at these pretty pictures.
For any vendor, it's thinking about yourself not as a solution to a project, but as a long-term investment to a solution to many potential projects. And presenting your way of thinking and your philosophy and your approach in that sense, I think will get you called back more often in the future. I've definitely been in calls where I've suggested various vendors and, I'm working with the creative team to figure out who we're going to bring in and who we're going to bid. And perhaps they've bid with somebody previously and didn't award, but they really liked the way that director approached the solution. Even though we didn't go with them in that project, should we get them back for a conversation about this? Because they remembered something in the conversation about the person specifically and how they think and how they're approaching the work.
Yeah, that's so important. That's so important. I wish I could just take a yellow highlighter right now and highlight what you're saying, because it's really, anybody listening, I think everybody knows it in theory, but just to hear you say it, I think would be a great gift for people going into 2026 to just be remembering that. I think it's important. So speaking of 2026, I think our industry right now is in a crazy time, and things are changing and evolving at this insane breakneck speed. And I started this thing with my family a couple of years ago where instead of resolutions for a new year, we choose a word. And that word kind of defines us for the year. And then we always kind of check in with each other on our word. And then, did we succeed or not? And it's been kind of a fun thing. So I've kind of brought that forward into, my business. And I'm curious about a word for you in terms of where you see our industry in 2026. What do you think is kind of defining where it is right now?
It's so funny you say that, Heather, because I do the same thing personally.
Oh, you do?
But I pick 3 words to give myself a better shot at hitting one of them.
Okay, we're going to digress for a minute. What are your 3 words?
So my 3 words for myself in 2026 are optimism, rejection, and abundance.
Okay. I like that.
Yes.
I like that.
And I think to just quickly touch on each of those and we can get back to
I'm curious
this side of it. But optimism, I think it's a kind of audacious thing to go for right now, because so much is changing in the world, so much is changing in the industry, and it's pretty easy to feel overwhelmed and bogged down. And so it's changing optimism from kind of a naive hope that things are going to get better. I hope so. And it's turning it into a discipline and a choice. I am choosing optimism and then not letting the environment that I'm choosing it and define me. I'm defining the environment.
I love it.
Rejection, it pertains to the question that you had about how do we approach the long-term relationship? It's reframing rejection as the goal. That basically, if you're getting rejected, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you went for something that you could potentially fail at, which is brave.
Right. You don't get to be rejected if you don't even try.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then abundance, I think, again, there's a sense of our jobs are disappearing and AI and all of this that's coming in and really creating a mindset of scarcity and a reality in some ways of scarcity. And so my answer to that is abundance. There's more than enough for all of us. The human mind is endlessly creative. The imagination is, limitless. And so we have the ability to create and come up with new ways to create abundance, not only for ourselves, but for each other.
I love that. That's great. And I love the 3 words.
Yes.
Mine was discovery.
Wonderful.
At first it was do. And then I was like, no, I do a lot. So I don't need the active word of do because I just do it all the time. Discovery kind of was more around from a work point of view. I feel like I'm discovering and learning so much, and we will come back to AI in just a second, but I am learning a ton and I'm discovering a lot and learning a lot about my artists in the process. But for me personally, I think I need to choose things for myself more than for my business, my family, my friendships. I don't often discover something maybe I'll take a writing class. Maybe I'm going to go, I want to go see more plays, things like that, where I need to discover different things instead of staying in the same lanes that I always stay in because I'm so busy. So I'm working on that.
What's the first thing, in 2026 that you feel like you're going to tap into that? Is it plays? Is it books?
I emailed this woman that I want to do this writing class with so badly. And it comes at a time, it's once a week for 8 weeks, but she's on the West Coast. It's right smack in the middle of my workday for an hour. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do it. It's just an hour. And it's like I would have been sitting on a call. So I'm going to choose it and I'm going to do it. So I'm excited about that because I think I'm going to discover other things that will help me in work and life and family through that writing class. So
I absolutely agree with you. And that kind of ties into my abundance word where it's you could think about your work day as I have to be on these calls. I have to. And it's actually coming out of that mindset of abundance that you're I can make the time for this and it's going to come back tenfold for me in other ways because it's sparking your creativity and it's sparking a different part of who you are. And there's so many parts of who you are that I think when we get exactly what you're saying, when we get in that kind of doer mode where we're just tapping the keys and hitting the call button, it's so easy to just kind of function rather than really flourish in all of the gifts that we have and all of the facets that we have as creative people.
I fully agree. So I'm channeling that word. I'm checking myself with it. So, and I'm gonna remember your 3 words too. So
I can't wait to see what you write.
Well, that'll be a little bit further down the road, but thank you. But bringing it back to the now in our industry and even channeling all of those 4 words we just talked about, AI is such a big buzzword. And it's not even a buzzword. It's happening. It's something we're all executing against. And, tell me what you're seeing out there in terms of AI, in terms of creation, in terms of contracts, use cases. Why don't you share some experiences with us?
Definitely. As with any massive technological change or any change of any sort, AI it's a huge word that means a lot of things, but is thrown around as a singular thing. And so I think sometimes it takes a little bit of curiosity when you're in these conversations with clients, especially to understand what do they mean when they talk about AI, because AI can mean lots of different things. It certainly means lots of different things for lawyers. So it's good to really understand what AI means in the context of the project or the team or process that you're talking about. So what I'm seeing a lot of is people not necessarily knowing the full scope of what AI can be. A lot of times in the creative world, we think about AI as generative AI. So it's where we're using AI to create things. And that's where you get a lot of the sense of people feeling like maybe jobs are being replaced or reductions are happening. And there's a lot of other ways that AI can be utilized in our world beyond just generating content. And so I think it's really important, especially in my role as a producer, to be actively learning. I think abstaining from learning is going to kill your career, to be honest. You have to be learning what it is. You don't necessarily have to use it, but you have to know what's out there so that when your clients come to you, which often happens, and they say, hey, I want to do this project. Oh, and I have to use AI. Very often, the clients don't fully know what that means in terms of production. They just know that's a KPI, it's a buzzword that they need to deliver on. And so it's your job as a producer to interpret that and then also figure out how you can do that for them legally within whatever your MSA is with that client, whatever your master service agreement or your SOW allows for, and to also find the right partners to bring that in and do that for them. AI has been so integrated into almost all of our tools at this point that it's almost impossible to not use AI, but a lot of people don't realize that. So figuring out what does successful use of AI look like for that client? How can you answer their question rather than feeling like you're overwhelmed because you have to do everything in AI from this point on?
Well, and really understanding it from the point of view, as a photographer or director who's being asked to use it, it is mostly generative at that point, right? And I've got a lot of artists who will say to me, and not just artists on my roster, I'm talking about just in general, there are artists that'll say, I'm never going to use AI. I don't want, blah, 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 which is absolutely okay. You do not have to use it. But as I tell every one of them, you have to understand it, because if you're going to speak with confidence that it's not the right tool for this particular job that you're being considered for, you have to understand what you're up against. Right. And it's not enough to say it's not authentic, because that's fine. Nobody can argue that, but everyone can argue that you might be able to get it done faster with more value, less expensively. And you might have a client that doesn't value the authenticity as much. So if you can't speak to why you can provide what they need without AI, you need to be able to do that. It's super important.
Absolutely. It's positioning, essentially.
There's a lot of confusion out there with AI. People are just learning, and we are at a very unique time that if we can, I don't want to say we need shared language in the sense that we're all saying the same thing, but if we can all educate each other and discover and learn from each other, then we can all come to the table in a conversation very confidently to explain our tool that we want to use, or a tool that we think is, a really smart tool to use. And I don't know, I think it's really critical for everyone, even those people who don't think they will ever use AI, to understand it, because I've got lifestyle artists who are being paired with post-production teams that are creating AI backgrounds to put their lifestyle images in. And if you don't understand, great, you're never going to use AI yourself. But if you don't understand how it's working, you won't be able to create a treatment that can help sell why you're the right person to create those lifestyle images.
I totally agree. And I also think that across the board in this industry, not just this industry, across the board, as we move into our careers, not knowing things has always been kind of a no-no. You have to know everything before everybody else. And this is a great moment in time to unabashedly say, I don't really understand this. Can you explain it to me? Or
Yes.
seek out people who do know. And AI is so new to this industry and it's going to be changing. And I say so new, not like it's been around for a few years and people have been using it, but in mass and also in expectations.
Well, it's leveling up this year.
Yes.
Clients are starting to want to use it.
Correct. It's not considered kind of on the perimeter of like, what's that over there? It's here. And so I think it's a perfect time to lean into saying, I don't really know what this is. I want to know. And then I'll make an informed decision rather than saying, I'm not getting involved with that or I am. There is certainly, and I don't think we can ignore the environmental impact to it.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole different ballgame. And I have thoughts about that. And everybody should have, I think, thoughts about that. And that should be part of your decision-making process. But again, if you don't know, can you fully make an informed decision to position how you're going to approach it? So right now, I think the most I can tell everybody is go out and learn as much as you can. I'm learning. Everybody's learning as much as you can. Figure out how it works, how it could integrate, and then decide where it should integrate.
Well, and the other part of that in terms of learning is understanding usage around AI. And what I mean by usage is, I've got clients that are starting to put in their terms and conditions that they want to be able to take whatever I create for them and upload to their AI platforms to be able to create derivative works and to be able to kind of use AI tools for retouching so they can change the color of something or an expression of something. And I've really had to show up to these conversations and ask a lot of questions like, okay, if you want to upload this to your platform, are you planning on using machine learning? Are you planning to train to create new looks and feel for other products or your own brand? And, I'm being told no, that they're not. And I'm pushing back and saying, okay, great. Then if you're not planning on doing that, then let's write that in to the terms. Because essentially, if I allow you to upload something to your AI platform without any parameters, I'm giving you a work for hire. Yes. And I don't want to do that. I've never done that before without attaching a large fee to it. So if I start letting people do that, I've eroded years and years and years of work around usage. And if people don't know to ask those questions or read those terms the way that they are written and understand, it's going to be a bit of a slippery slope for our industry. So I think it's a bit of a plug out here for the Artist Management Association, who's doing a lot of work around that right now to educate people. But making sure, like you said, that people recognize it's such an early part of the industry where we can all be asking questions of each other. Now's the time to do it.
Yes. And I think it's also on the producers as well to educate clients, because you have a lot of clients who don't understand the difference between work for hire and why does IP come into all of this, and why do I have to pay separate fees to a photographer versus talent versus these different entities. And it's because these are things that we kind of assume are people are educated on, marketers are educated on, and they're not. And that's not, nobody's bad, nobody's doing anything wrong, but that comes of experience. And so it's also on the producers to help explain how this works so that everybody can feel like their work is being valued and protected and paid for appropriately, and navigate these conversations between the clients and the artists.
And don't you think it's a little bit like you don't know what you don't know sometimes?
Absolutely.
Right? We were on this, I was leading with Kelly Montez of Apostrophe and Jen Jenkins of Giant Artists yesterday. We were leading this roundtable for our AMA members. And, we were really pushing the idea that you don't know what you don't know yet. So you have to be able to ask questions, and here are the questions you should ask. And afterwards, everyone was like, oh my God, that was so helpful. Thank you. I had no idea that I should be asking those questions.
Yeah. One thing that I really appreciate about what you do, Heather, is you equip people with actionable content, not just theory. And I think right now we're going to need a lot more actionable content, because there's so much theoretical back and forth. And if we are not giving people things that they can actually utilize and work with and learn from, I think that's all going to fall upon deaf ears.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
That's something that you excel at. And I really appreciate how you advocate for that in our industry.
Thank you. Well, when people like you show up to have a conversation, it only makes it better. So let's talk about the projects that are kind of floating around, like your world last year, and, things that you hear people talking about. What were the projects you were working on? Mostly print or CGI or motion or a combination of all of it? What was kind of rising to the top?
So it was a good number of CGI, design work, illustrative work, and AI all coming together for key visuals for brands, and then being able to create kind of a modular toolkit out of that. I think modular content creation is here to stay for the foreseeable. And I think what we're seeing is these kind of one and done productions are really not going to be funded.
And you mean one and done, like it's just print, right? You mean like it's going to be print, CGI, motion, like, and all these different types of assets.
Exactly. Integration is kind of assumed. I was thinking about this actually in preparation for our conversation, and coming up through my career, I didn't know until probably 10 years in to my work that you could be specialized as a print producer or broadcast producer. Because when I was going through school and being educated, and then also beginning my career, you didn't have that option. You had to be an integrated producer. You couldn't get a job. And so I think that is kind of the metric for a lot of future work, is needing to understand both sides of motion and print, and really being able to garner expertise of how those different campaigns speak to each other.
I would also add into that a real deep understanding of the post-production, CGI, AI, animation, all of it. Like, that is so important nowadays also to understand. Would you agree with that?
I think that there was a time when you went out, you shot beautiful photography, you retouched it, and made it match within whatever the brand style guidelines were. And then you released it into the world. And now in almost every pipeline I have for photography, there is some aspect of CG or some aspect of creating something compositively that's not on set with you.
I think I was hearing a double negative. That was confusing me there for a minute. But yes, I fully agree with you. Even for my lifestyle artists, right? The ones who aren't like being asked to bid these big conceptual projects. Like,
exactly,
they too are having to create, there's some sort of, element, whether it be in the motion, adding words, or, some cool technique to the imagery or something. Like, it's happening in post.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think too, what is also happening as a result of, actually, I don't even know what it's a result of, but I think it's a result of how all of these productions are becoming integrated. I think it used to be that if you, Rue, had a creative problem that you needed to solve, you either solved it through print or motion, and you would go to your, broadcast rep, or you would come to your print rep, which would have been me. And there were just those two channels through which, or maybe animation, right? Or an illustrator, like you would go through those buckets. Now you have so many choices. You could call me and I can give you a bunch of options. You can call your, live action reps. You can call your post-production house. You can call your production company. options. You can call like the animation house, like you can call so many different types of people to begin the job. And as somebody who represents photographers, I might get the call from the post house that says, oh, Rue called me for this job and we're creating this and we need a photographer. Whereas it used to start with me and I'd say, okay, here's the photographer. And then the photographer's like, here's the post house we're going to use. So the work is going through many different channels and it's really interesting. And I think it's all because of that integration you talked about.
I would totally agree. And I think to add to that, to go kind of back to the modularity, there is an element of, you used to go very traditionally, you would have this rep and this is the roster, and then they work with these retouching shops, and it was somewhat siloed. Everybody had their like go-tos, and now you get requests from clients and sometimes from your creatives where they want to pick and choose. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's totally okay to not work that way. And we're going to continue to see where somebody might say, I want to work with this director. I know he belongs to this production shop, but I also want to work with this production shop because of XYZ. And can they give us a photographer who knows how to do over the shoulder without having to do a separate shoot? So that kind of piecing together of a team is a lot more a la carte than it used to be.
Yep.
And I know that some people agree with it, some people don't, and that's everybody's prerogative. I'll say that trend-wise, I'm seeing that much more commonly in the recent productions I've been doing.
Yeah. And I talk to my artists about that. I talk about this idea of the stack. Like, what is our stack that we're putting together to show somebody like you, Rue, or a producer out of brand or whoever? We've got all of our ducks in a row and can provide the same thing that you need, or not the same thing, but just provide whatever it is that you need, so that when you come to me, I can get you all of those different integrated modular parts. But it doesn't mean that your creative isn't going to start at a different point in the stack. He might have a relationship with a production company and he's going to say, or she's going to say, let's go to them. And they're going to, treat the photographer like a line item, right? It's not going to be the same. It's going to be like, I put $5,000 in for you. Are you interested? Right. And I'm going to be like, well, what's the usage? And they're going to say it's unlimited time, unlimited use. And I'm like, oh my God, you just negotiated that for me. And that's a terrible rate. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think to that point, one way that people, especially production shops and reps, can help themselves when they are invited to bid and it is an integrated campaign is to ask, firstly, if they can get the names of the other shops. So for example, if you're doing the photography portion, hey, can we find out who's doing the video or who's doing the illustration? Can we find out who's doing post? And have collaborative conversations during the bidding process, because that's really impressive to me as a producer. I'm like, great, they're already working at figuring out how they can synchronize efforts and make sure that they're coming as a united front. They're showing curiosity on the holistic picture rather than just showing up and saying, yeah, we'll do the photography bit and throw us in with whoever. I think another aspect too is like, in that asking, hey, do you have folks? If not, here's some people that we love to work with, and really being a partner in the bidding process and not just somebody who's responding to the question that was asked.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of times when, we are getting the call through the production company, there's not a lot of collaboration allowed at that point. It's just a yes or no, are you interested kind of thing. But that's okay, because, we all recognize like the pipelines are changing, and, I want to be present in as many pipelines as possible, and then be the one in control of saying yes or no. So
yeah, more structured around when that call comes from an agency producer. Yes. Certainly if it's coming from a prodco, that's who you're going to be working with.
Exactly. Okay. So tell me about how you find talent. When you need to find a director, you need to find a photographer, where do you start? What's the tip of the iceberg for you?
So there's a few different places I'll start. I have my list of reps that I've met through the years, either from doing work together or like inheriting work or trade shows where I've met folks. So I have my reps. I'll have a trusted group of other producers that I'll go to and say, hey, I'm looking, if I don't know, what I'm looking for, I'll say, here's kind of the metrics of what I'm seeking. Do you guys know of anybody? Have you worked with anybody recently you love? And then again, going back to that insane level of organization I mentioned earlier, I have a Google sheet that I put every vendor that I interact with in every category of production: directors, photographers, reps, post house, production shops, CGI houses, everything. And I'll note how I found them, what the relationship is, if I have a reference to them. So I have that book, if you will, as a reference that I can also go back to, because we can only remember so much.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So that's kind of that three-prong approach is my starting point.
Yeah. And I feel like I love hearing you say that you have your own list, because for me, everything does come down to relationships, and I invest so much in the relationships that I like hearing that they do pay off, because it's a genuine reason why I'm in this job, right? I think, as an only child, I always wanted to be at the person's, my friend's house that had brothers and sisters, and there was always a lot of people around. So as a person who, doesn't work in a big office with lots of people surrounded by lots of people all the time, the relationships are important. It's a big part of what I rely on in this job. So hearing you repeat back that is kind of the tip of the iceberg for you is helpful.
Yeah. And I also think, going back to the idea that you're not just auditioning for a project, you're auditioning yourself. Everybody that I've bid is in there, who I've bid them, and I'm like, oh, or even if I haven't bid them, but we had creative calls where we thought maybe they'd be good for this, but then the creative team decided not to move forward with them for who knows what reason. They're still in the list of references that I go back to every time I have a job where I'm like, oh yeah, we did talk to them. Let me put them on the list for this one.
How do you present options to your team?
I'm going to be honest. It's an email list with names, a link to the work. If I've talked to a rep and they've sent me the reels, and if there's a reference, what the reference is. So have I worked with them, or referral, I should say. Have I worked with them? Has somebody else worked with them? Have they worked with a company before? Is there an outstanding piece of work in their portfolio that really relates back to the creative ask that we're looking at? It's an email. Yeah. And then those emails get passed from producers to producers sometimes. So the list can grow and shrink accordingly.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it's so important from my point of view to share with you, like when I get the request, to share it in a very clear, concise way. So like to hear you say that you send links is really great, because I try and be very organized about what I send. So like I'll group my artists like, okay, oh, you want lifestyle artists who have photographed real patients. Great. Here's the artist. Here's a link to their website. Here's a link to the specific portfolio with real people in it. And here's a little blurb about them. Because I know that you're going to be cutting and pasting and forwarding it on to someone else. What you don't need from me is like a million links that don't really make sense and make you have to work and dig on your own. Like I need to be really clear about what I'm sending.
Yep, that structure that you send is exactly what I go through as a producer and glean down to, who I think that knowing my creative team, who they're going to want to work with and who they might be interested in. There are things and nuances that I know because I'm involved on the agency side that you wouldn't know or the creatives wouldn't know. So it's all of those kind of fine details that add to that list being condensed to what I send to the creatives. And then obviously we further condense to what we present to clients.
Yeah. All of that is really great to hear. Okay. So just one little last question here about like finding talent and sharing it with your team and stuff. Is there any advice you can give to like an artist listening as a way that they could, like, if you don't know them, you have no experience with them, you have no reference, maybe you don't know their rep, like, how could they share work with you in a way that might get your attention?
So I'm not working with a rep in this instance?
Possibly. Yeah. Or I guess it does. I guess the rep doesn't matter in this case. It's, you just don't know the work of this person. So what are ways, maybe the answer is if they're with a rep that that is helpful. But regardless, how can someone get in front of you? Is it just email?
I'll also be honest. I get tons of emails all the time. Some of it's the timing of it all, right? I happen to have just got a brief that I need a music vendor, and a music vendor who I haven't spoken to in ages does their quarterly check-in with me that morning. Some of it's that serendipitous.
Yeah.
I think, right, like, especially if you're somebody who's visual, like an artist, an illustrator, photographer, using keywords that are going to capture, like, hey, it's XYZ category of work that I'm going through. Because sometimes I'll go to my, waterfall of emails from vendors and I'll type in child photography. And keyword wise, I get all the emails where they've said they do child photography, and I can zip through and see who's been doing child photography recently. And then I might reach out to those artists. So some of it's just consistency of sharing the work and also including keywords in the email.
I just read an article that Gmail is starting to integrate, you can opt in or out, but AI is a part of your like email or your Gmail, and you will be able to type in, what was the name of the plumber that I was emailing with the other day, or send me the, collect all the emails from the, the photographers that photograph children. Like you will be able to start to do that, which I think will be fascinating.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think trying to make it as easy as possible to make your email searchable.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's just, not bombarding, but being consistent with showing up and showing that you're doing work is a really important thing. And anytime that you, especially if you're being asked to maybe work on a specific job, anytime you can say, yeah, I have, one thing that clients always love is if they know that person has worked, even if it's within the larger group, because I work in healthcare a lot, obviously. So even if you say, oh yeah, I haven't worked with this brand, but I've worked for this client for another brand on another project, and here's the work that we did, that's always a huge selling point.
Yeah. Interesting. Really, really fascinating. Okay. So we're kind of wrapping up here, and I forever have always asked the same two questions. I've thought about changing it up, but I'm not going to, because I like that they're consistently the same two questions. What is your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you do? What would you be?
Well, so Sundays for me usually involve some kind of cooking adventure. I go every Saturday, I go to the farmer's market and I wing it. I don't ever have a plan. It's one of the times in my life that I am not organized and I can be a free spirit. And I just show up to the farmer's market, which is very big where I live. And I get whatever is seasonal and I get whatever inspires me. And then on Sunday, I figure out what on earth I'm going to do with it. And so usually it's a lot of time spent Sunday being creative with my hands, not being on a screen, and using my other senses and listening to jazz music or bossa nova music. That's like a perfect day for me. And then if I were not a producer, I would probably be working somewhere in psychology or therapy work.
It's kind of the same thing.
It's just exactly kind of what we do. At the end of the day, we do a lot of that anyways in the work that we do every day. So I kind of get to do a little of both.
That's great. I love that. Well, Rue, this has been so lovely. You are the first interview of 2026, and I love that. I hope my 2026 includes more of you. And like I said earlier, the fact that I'm going to see you next week, hopefully is the first step towards that. So
yeah, let's continue chatting. I think one last thing I'll say is I think 2026 is the year of IRL. I think people want to be in person. I think people want to meet face to face. And so one of my goals is to meet as many people as I can, in this season while people are kind of, it's cold and it's early, but I think people are excited about a new year.
I agree.
I just would encourage everybody to continue to reach out and meet new people and ask for meetings, and let's all, really strengthen this community, which you, Heather, are a champion of, and I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Rue. It's been a pleasure. And I hope to see you many, many more times this year.
Let's do it.
Okay.